What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Touchline Talk Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Before I jump in, as always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content I put out every single week. There's only one place to start today's show. First segment is going to be dedicated exclusively to what happened in Manchester between Manchester City and Arsenal. And then second half of the show, or second segment, going to look at kind of the other midweek news and notes. U.S. Soccer has a new sporting director, more Premier League action to discuss quickly. Burnley have won the championship. There was a big Coppa Italia semi-final second leg. All of that good stuff coming up in the second part of the show. Like I said, though, only one place to start. That is Manchester City Arsenal. Before I get into the game itself, I want to make sure this is put in the proper context. This was not so much a title decider as it was a last hope for Arsenal. Because you can't build a pathway to a title assuming you're going to take points, and particularly all three, in this game if you're Arsenal. Where this fell off the rails for Arsenal were those last three games, and specifically the Southampton one. Because I was adamant before that the situation hadn't really changed all that much. Then you go drop points. You have to rescue a point against the worst team in the league at home in your final game before this one. And so now all of a sudden, your lead is almost gone. City still have these two games in hand. And even if you would have gotten a draw here, you still wouldn't have been able to control much. But it would have been helpful to at least give yourself a cushion that City, and knowing that City do have to go get the points. And now you're in a situation where City can stumble a little bit and still win because their maximum point value is so much higher. But it was not about this game. And you could tell that from the opening whistle because Arsenal just looked like they knew they had lost their chance at winning the title. They just had nothing to offer for the most part. So yes, could they have gotten this back on track with a win and completely changed the conversation here? Absolutely. But you're hoping you do something against the odds there. It's not part of a logical pathway to winning this title. Beating Southampton was. Getting more than 3 points from those last three games was. That's where this got lost. The question was, can they somehow miraculously stop this snowball? And the answer was quite clearly no. Before the goals even started coming in, Arsenal are giving it away. Thomas Partey steps across De Bruyne. Certainly could have been a penalty. For me, this is where I like VAR to just do what VAR is supposed to do. It's not a clear and obvious error. I would have gone with whatever the referee on the field gave, and that's what happened. Was it more of a penalty than not? I would concede that, but it's not something you would completely want to redo. No issue with it. And obviously, it didn't impact anything, so it's not really a talking point. That was before the goal started coming in, though. And then De Bruyne gets the opener. Haaland holds the ball up, lays it off to him. De Bruyne was sensational in this game, and I want to say this again. I bring it up every once in a while. The fact that he hasn't had more success in Ballon d'Or voting, the fact that he's just far and away the best midfielder in the world. And I do think that he and Haaland are the two guys who you can kind of pull out of this Manchester City machine, and it changes things. You can rotate the wingers, you can rotate the center backs, the outside backs. De Bruyne is the one guy, and of course they can survive without him. But there is nobody on this team to replace him because there's not a player in the world to replace him that does what he does. And you saw it in this game. He was sensational. The other part of this story was that Thomas Partey and that Arsenal midfield had no clue how to prevent him from just running at them and finding all kinds of space. From a tactical standpoint, that was the story of this game. Arsenal got overran in the midfield. Partey was... I don't want to bash him too badly, but he had a really, really rough game. He was awful. And so now all of a sudden, they're having to make... Ben White has a key block. De Bruyne almost scored again there. Then you get the John Stones goal, which VAR overturns to give City a 2-0 lead. De Bruyne adds a third, and it's kind of over at that point, even though it felt like it was over from pretty much goal one. And I am going to bounce a little bit between Arsenal and City here because I want to finish talking about the game before I start talking about the ramifications. This Arsenal team was hanging with Manchester City, was ahead of Manchester City, in large part because those depth pieces were delivering. Nketiah, even that goal that Jorginho scored, Reece Nelson, Trossard. You had more than just your preferred 11 who were making significant contributions to this. Now you're looking at it. All of your strikers, including Gabriel Jesus, the goals have dried up. You don't have William Saliba, who's your best defender, and you don't have somebody capable of replacing him, in large part because you don't have a right back at this point, because Tomiyasu was your one option there outside of Ben White, who Arteta didn't seem to trust that much anyway, and so Ben White needs to play right back. I feel fine about a Gabriel Ben White center back pairing. The problem is you don't have anybody to play a right back. So they had some cover, and then you had two injuries in your defense, and all of a sudden they're really thin. And Rob Holding has to play because that's the best way to organize your back four at this point. And then there's the midfield. Because you do have some options up front. I'm not worried about that attack. I don't have much criticism for that attack. I believe in Martinelli. I believe in Saka. Obviously, they could probably use with an upgraded striker, although I'm also okay giving Jesus a little more time to get back into the swing of things. But you got two foundational pieces in your two wingers. And Trossard, I was all about that signing, and he's proven me right. As good as this midfield has been, and they've been excellent this season, you are still talking about Granit Xhaka being part of that midfield, and there just is this part of me that has a hard time envisioning that trio being good enough to win a Premier League, being good enough to perform at the level they need to over 38 games. And Odegaard's been sensational. Partey has been phenomenal at times. But now Partey is just in this really, really bad stretch of form where he has been poor multiple games. And Xhaka isn't giving you all that much. And so you're kind of relying on Odegaard to carry the entire midfield. And he doesn't do the defensive stuff, which is where you need more than him. This really is about the other two, not so much about Odegaard. You compare that to what City have, to what, Chelsea in theory have, to what Newcastle are building. Welcome back to the Touchline Talk Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Apologies for the internet issues there. It looks like I have got it figured out and we are back live, so I apologize for that. Before I jump in to segment 2 here, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content I put out on YouTube every single week. Gonna just go through some news and notes, developments over the last week here, specifically the last few days. There's just a lot of things that have happened, none of which I wanted to spend an entire segment on. So I'm just going to kind of run through all of them and touch on all kinds of different things across the world of soccer. So here we go. Staying in the Premier League quickly, want to talk about the relegation battle. You had a couple key developments here at the bottom of the table. Tuesday, Leicester goes to Ellen Road, gets a point against Leeds. Good point for Leicester. Pretty good Leicester performance. It very easily could have been a win. Leeds also could have won a game they probably didn't deserve to. Patrick Bamford had something close to a sitter in the final minutes and put it wide. And Jamie Vardy got his one chance and he took it. That was the difference in the game. One team had a confident striker. One team had a striker who's really struggling for confidence right now. One team took their chance. One team didn't. And you combine that with Nottingham Forest getting a huge win today. And I'm becoming quite concerned for Leeds here. The remaining schedule is difficult. Leicester seem to be starting to pick things up. Nottingham Forest, like I said, massive win, huge confidence boost. So you're getting even closer to the relegation zone, and everybody else is kind of starting to separate themselves. You got Southampton at the bottom, you got Forest, you got Everton, you got Leicester, and you got Leeds. To me, those are the 5 teams in the thick of the relegation battle right now. Now, if somebody goes on a bad run, they could eventually, obviously, throw themselves back into the ring. But those are the 5 teams I'm looking at. And right now, my confidence level is higher in at least 2 of those teams than Leeds. There's time to turn this around, but they're just not creating very much. And who is your reliable person to take the chances you are creating? You want that chance falling to Patrick Bamford. Except you don't want that chance falling to Patrick Bamford. And for as bad as that second half went for them, those 2 points could be the difference between them getting relegated or not. That one moment. Because your striker is just not in good form right now. And he has turned back into the Patrick Bamford who has really struggled to stay healthy and score goals in the Premier League. It seemed like he had put the goal-scoring thing behind him when he was so good when they came up. And it's not happening for him right now. That scares me. With Leicester starting to figure things out under Dean Smith, Nottingham Forest has the talent. They're not going to go away. Sean Dyche is going to keep Everton somewhat organized at least. If you ask me right now, if I had to predict, Leeds are going down. Again, there's still time, but those 2 games really did kind of change the complexion, and Forest is the big winner here. But the one team that didn't benefit from either of those results was Leeds. Jumping over to Italy, Coppa Italia semi-final leg 2. Inter Milan defeat Juventus, get an early goal to win on aggregate. There isn't all that much to say about the game itself. Inter were really good. Juventus were not. They were absolutely deserving winners. It just is fascinating to me. This is really what I wanted to talk about. That as bad as they have been in Serie A, and it's seemingly every week it's less likely they're going to qualify for the Champions League through their league finish. Here they are, back in the Coppa Italia final, in the Champions League semifinals, against a team that has also struggled domestically, that's also an Italian team, that you're playing a derby, they can absolutely reach the Champions League final, right? It's not even like they're this massive underdog in the semis. You could even argue that he should be the favorite. So we're talking about a world in which they failed to qualify for the Champions League, but probably win the Coppa Italia and could very well also get to a Champions League final, and who knows what happens if you get to the final. It just blows my mind. What is happening with these Milan clubs just isn't getting talked enough about. So I wanted to bring it up here because they have struggled mightily domestically. And specifically in the league, because Inter are doing just fine in the Coppa Italia. And they're probably going to get Fiorentina in the final, which sets up a really interesting dynamic because Fiorentina have really picked things up in the last few months. It was a disastrous beginning, and now they are really starting to fly. All kinds of confidence. They got a good draw in the semis. Looks like they're going to take care of that to get to the final. So that should be a really interesting setup where Inter are the favorites, but you're playing a team full of confidence in really good form. Hypothetically, assuming something bizarre doesn't happen in that second leg. And for Juventus, this is another opportunity to qualify for Europe gone, but right now they're in a Champions League spot because right now their 15-point deduction is overturned, so that's a little bit less of a concern. They also just weren't good in this game. Got to give Inter credit. You watch games like this with Inter, and you just wonder, and not that they've been terrific from start to finish in the Champions League, but you just wonder how they don't take care of business in Serie A more. It is a very strange part of the way this season is unfolding in Italy. Jumping back to England for a minute here, Burnley already clinched promotion. Now they have also won the championship. Sheffield United also clinched promotion. So you've got two recent Premier League teams coming back up next season. Now we wait for the jumbled mess of all of these teams trying to get themselves into the promotion playoff. That's kind of the storyline in the championship moving forward here. But I do want to take a minute to talk about Burnley because I really haven't gotten the opportunity yet. First, Vincent Kompany has done a tremendous job. Vincent Kompany has done exactly what you would expect Vincent Kompany to do. He was made to be a manager, and you can see it in the results, what he's done with this team. And not only has he just steadied a ship that was sinking, at least to a certain degree. You can argue whether keeping Dyche would have saved him or not. But Burnley were clearly on a downward trajectory, and he has completely changed that. He has also redefined what Burnley looked like on the field. Complete 360. Sorry, complete 180, not a 360. We are not back to Sean Dyche. Complete 180. Right? We went from Sean Dyche to Pep Guardiola, essentially. That is incredibly difficult to do. And by the way, he did it on a team with financial difficulties that's playing in a lower division this season. Remarkable. And so the interesting part of this to me becomes, I will always like the chances of the defensively sound teams that get promoted more than the really exciting ones that score a bunch of goals. I just feel like historically your defense translates better than your attack when you're up at that next level. Now, the team that specifically is challenging this notion right now is Fulham. Because Fulham were essentially what Burnley are this season, last season. Mitrovic scored a bazillion goals. They were terrific to watch. And they came up, and it hasn't looked the same, but obviously they've had a very, very good season. They got it to translate. Can Burnley do the same thing? I am fascinated to find that out because I I will always defend the defensive style and the conservative approach when it comes to trying to keep your team in the Premier League. And that is not who Burnley are anymore. And then the other part of this is Vincent Kompany there next season? You're seeing him linked with the Spurs job, for example. Does he feel like this is unfinished business? Does anybody actually offer him a job he would jump at? Does he stay at Burnley until hypothetically he's Pep Guardiola's successor? You know, what does his managerial trajectory look like? Because he's been awfully impressive. And you look at, you know, some of these other guys kind of in his managerial class, if you will. Lampard, never done anything like this. Yes, he had one pretty good season at Chelsea. But since then, his reputation has just basically gone downward. Just every game every game Aston Villa play after Steven Gerrard makes him look worse. That with what Unai Emery's doing with that club. They're going to be in Europe next season. There's still a chance they make the Champions League. I don't think it's going to happen, but that's where we are. Kompany already has this dominant championship season under his belt right away. So it's going to be very interesting for me to see how do people kind of interpret that? And is he kind of determined to finish what he started at Burnley and at least see this out for a season or two before he goes and takes the next job? Is he content waiting it out until Manchester City? We're going to have to see how that all plays out, but congratulations to Burnley, your championship champions. One more thing I want to mention real quickly before I jump to my next topic. Valentin Castellanos, formerly of NYCFC, I guess technically still of NYCFC, scored 4 goals on Real Madrid. If you want to criticize Barcelona for the way this season is ending, fine. But you better also criticize Real Madrid for not making this a title race. I get that they are who they are in the Champions League. This has been a really, really poor La Liga season, highlighted once again by this loss. This should be a title race with the amount of points Barcelona have dropped, and it just doesn't matter because Real Madrid are not putting up any kind of fight. I'm going to keep harping on this point because it matters. You cannot just take Real Madrid in the Champions League and apply that across the board because it's factually incorrect. And we've got our comment here pointing out, a fair question too, whether Vincent Kompany would actually want the Spurs job. Yeah. Especially if you're, and this is kind of what and the interesting conversation about Gerrard too. If you're in a spot where you really can't lose, Rangers, theoretically Burnley, as long as it doesn't go poorly next season, is it even worth taking the risk if you feel like you are in the driver's seat for the job you really want? Because Gerrard took that jump and it moved him back big time. If Vincent Kompany just keeps Burnley up next season, his stock goes even higher than it is right now. And you can get to a point, if you just do a good enough job every season, that you have basically cemented yourself as Pep's successor. I would have to think. Going to Spurs, sure, it could also give you the opportunity to manage in the Champions League, a much better shot at winning trophies. It could also derail all of the progress that you've made in this short time. Very fair point. Yeah, Spurs have a tough sell to whoever their next manager is going to be. That's going to be a very interesting storyline this offseason. The final thing I want to get to here before I take my second break is the news from U.S. Soccer officially announcing Matt Crocker as the Federation's sporting director. Matt Crocker primarily working with Southampton, 2 different stints. First time more with the youth setup in an era where Southampton were churning out an incredible amount of really good players, and then had a stint with the English FA, and then came back more kind of overseeing the entire Southampton project, which I also believed doing some work with the Southampton women's team. So he does have some experience there, and plenty of experience on the youth development side of this, the academy side. And so where I want to start is simply acknowledging he checks the boxes. On paper, this hire makes sense. He gives you this nice, diverse background. He's worked in the Premier League. He's worked in and helped build and grow a really good academy. He's worked in the English FA. He's worked in the international game before. He's worked in a federation that also puts a lot of emphasis, and certainly more now than when he was there, but the women's team is absolutely and has been part of the English setup and a significant part of it. So he has all these different pieces. The sporting director, even though I still don't exactly understand what this person is specifically and what the role is, they're supposed to oversee this entire thing from top to bottom. That much we do know. And so you've got somebody who has kind of dabbled in all of the different aspects of this. That's a huge benefit. The second part of this is I really like the fact that Matt Crocker has nothing to do with U.S. soccer. What has gone on, just everything from obviously the situation with the World Cup, with the Reinas, with Greg Berhalter, to the NWSL stuff that U.S. soccer has gotten involved, and all of that Sidney Parlow-Cohn is trying to address and improve. There's just been a lot of negative, really sad developments, and just a lot of messy situations. The best way to move forward is to just wipe that out as much as you possibly can in terms of the actual makeup of the U.S. soccer leadership. Because in the last 5 months, we have seen the danger of having all of these people who know each other really well in all of these key positions. You're not going to get that with Matt Crocker. This federation needs a new, fresh perspective to figure out how to not just sustain, and specifically on the men's side, not to just sustain it, but to move it forward. I don't see a way you can do that by continuing to kind of keep it quote unquote in the family. Now, the other side of this is Matt Crocker also has to have people around him who understand the dynamics at work within U.S. soccer. And I mean that not just the federation, but generally. Because one of the things you heard coming out of this press conference that he had when he was introduced didn't seem all that confident in kind of the demographic makeup, understanding the cultural situation, which is completely understandable because it's something that you don't see in basically any other country. The U.S. has this very distinct soccer culture that is complicated. It's not necessarily bad. It's not a criticism. You just have to understand you've got all kinds of different people making up this U.S. soccer fan base, your talent pool, all of it. And you got to understand how to maximize that and how to make that a good thing. It's a different world than you're coming from England. And that's okay as long as there are also people who can educate him on that stuff. And it I don't think he's trying to hide from it or pretend like he doesn't, I think he even acknowledged he needs to learn more about this, and that's fine. He's not supposed to have it all figured out. This is the very beginning. But he's got to have people around him he's listening to and he's trusting that can help him with that part of this. That is my one concern here. It's not him specifically. It's just the price you pay for not keeping it within this U.S. soccer family is most of the person you bring in is probably not going to have experience in this area. And it is very specific to the United States and to this setup. There is no way to kind of gain that experience somewhere else. And so if you haven't lived it, you've got to be aware of that, because that is one of the biggest things moving forward, just as a general question, is how does U.S. soccer do a better job maximizing everything at its disposal? Doing a better job finding players. Doing a better job creating home field advantage. Doing a better job building relationships. All of this stuff. Just making this feel even more like it is a team, an entity for everybody in this country. It's a unique challenge that you just have to be aware of. It's not a bad thing. It's just it's not good or bad. It's just different. Can you find a way to maximize it rather than making it a detriment? That is the one downside that I wanted to highlight. And then the final part of this is Matt Crocker comes from Southampton. Southampton were just reportedly in negotiations with Jesse Marsch, and Jesse Marsch chose not to agree to a contract. There were reports it was a short-term deal. The specifics are not important for the point I am making here. Obviously, the first big job Matt Crocker has is to hire a men's national team coach. It is a fascinating dynamic to have hired somebody who theoretically just had a in-depth conversation with Jesse Marsch that did not end well. Maybe there was no bad blood, maybe no bridge was burned, and it ends up actually being a positive because he had a specific set of things he was looking for in terms of the Southampton manager and what that person was going to commit to considering the team's circumstances. Marsch said, I don't want to commit to that, and that was that, and it wasn't anything deeper than that. And so he would be more than happy to go explore the idea of hiring Jesse Marsch again for this job. But if something did happen, and it kind of seemed like this abrupt turnaround, that is a very interesting part of this. Is there any tension? Because these two people need to work well together, obviously. Especially if you have even highlighted this role maybe even a little bit more than when Ernie Stewart had it. This is the person calling the shots. And so we might, as this coaching search gets started, we might learn a little bit about what his relationship with Jesse Marsch is and what his thoughts about Jesse Marsch are by the names that we start hearing. Is he one of the big-time candidates that they're going after, one of the favorites, one of the names that keeps popping up? Or do we not hear very much about Jesse Marsch in the U.S. men's national team? Again, this is all just kind of throwing stuff out there because we don't know. And it'll be interesting to see kind of how Matt Crocker approaches this from a MLS versus rest of world standpoint. Because I will continue to say that you're going to have to convince me you've got a lot of better options than Jim Curtin. Do I believe Jesse Marsch is one of those options? Yes. specifically because Jim Curtin would then come join his staff if he's true to his word. And there certainly are, I'm not saying Jim Curtin should have this job, but you're going to have to convince me if you're going to bring in somebody who doesn't, you already have a sporting director who is not familiar with this talent pool. If you're bringing a coach in who isn't either, there needs to be a reason. And there could be a very good one. It's just creating all kinds of different possibilities, and the path forward just doesn't seem as clear now that you know somebody, the person in charge is not a U.S. soccer person. And again, I'm all for that. To me, that is a good thing, not a bad thing. But it seems much easier to go hire Jesse Marsch or to go hire Jim Curtin when Ernie Stewart's in charge. And, Ernie Stewart used to be Jim Curtin's boss. And Ernie Stewart obviously knows Jesse Marsch, and Jesse Marsch knows Brian McBride, and all of that kind of stuff. Now that you have completely cut those people off from this process, and you didn't go hire somebody like Oguchi Onweyu, who played for Jim Curtin, you hired somebody completely outside. It's just going to be I'm really curious to see what kind of names we start hearing about and what kind of value Matt Crocker puts on the sort of internal knowledge aspect of this. Is he happy to just trust his judgment and kind of take an objective view of everything? Or is he going to place a lot of value, like the Federation has in the past, and for good reason, on people who know MLS, people who know this talent pool? Is that going to be more or less a factor in the consideration for a coach, or is it going to be about the same? We just don't know the answer to that question. That's something I started thinking about here is now that we know the background, the resume of the person making this decision, we can start kind of comparing that to previous people in these kind of positions and look at where the differences may lie. Or it might be the same story and we hear a lot about Jesse Marsch and somebody who knows this, knows MLS, has coached some of these players, worked within the league, worked within U.S. Soccer, something like that, ends up being the coach. We're just going to have to wait and see on that. But Matt Crocker is your sporting director. Overall, I'm all for this. The biggest point to me in all of this is what I said at the beginning, which is for somebody who has kind of so many different roles to fill here, from a men's national team that's about to host a World Cup and is trying to compete with the best teams in the world, to a women's national team that is trying to maintain its status as the best team in the world, to a youth development system that is incredibly promising, continuing to improve, and incredibly complex because of the vast talent pool you are drawing from and the sports you are competing with to get the best athletes in the country. There's just a lot going on here. And Matt Crocker has kind of seen a little bit of everything in his career, and I really like that. And I like the fact that he doesn't have any attachment to any of the stuff that's gone on, so U.S. Soccer can just move forward, and the first step in that process is going to be figuring out who your men's national team manager is. I'm going to take my second break. When I come back real quick, the weekend look ahead, taking a quick peek at the biggest games around Europe and domestically this weekend. You're watching the Touchline Talk Show. Don't go anywhere. My apologies. Welcome back to the Touchline Talk Show one more time. It is time for the weekend look ahead, starting as always in England. Nottingham Forest at Brentford on Saturday. Huge game for Forest. Can you continue to build some momentum here? Give yourself a little bit of a cushion, or are you going to fall right back into the relegation zone? Wolves at Brighton on Saturday. Brighton trying to bounce back from this loss. Now it's kind of quite clear who your top four, at least to me, are. So now you're in this battle with the Tottenhams and the Liverpools of the world for those European spots. And Brighton have all these games in hand. How does that actually play out? Then Sunday, you got a big week on Sunday for whatever reason. Leeds at Bournemouth, relegation. Leeds got some even more difficult fixtures coming up after this. Can they take some points on the road? Can Bournemouth move themselves even closer to safety? Manchester City at Fulham. Even if Manchester City lose this game, I don't think it's a big deal. But it does change the conversation a little bit at least if City proceed to go drop 3 points here. Aston Villa at Manchester United. To me, this is the game of the weekend. I know that there's another one with bigger names in it that I'll get to in a minute. But this is the one with the most impact. And this is an opportunity for Aston Villa to give themselves a shot at the Champions League. A lot of things would need to go right for it to happen, even if they win this game. But it could open the door just a little bit more if they end up winning. Or Manchester United could effectively shut it, barring some kind of incredible run by somebody, and basically seal the top four. Then Southampton at Newcastle. Speaking of top four, you're expecting Newcastle to just take care of business. Can Southampton get some unexpected points here? Maybe get themselves a little bit closer to safety? Certainly looks like there's only one way this is going to end, but stranger things have happened. And then Tottenham at Liverpool. Again, you're battling for these European spots. Tottenham have this tough stretch coming up where there's a Manchester United game right before this on Thursday. Then you got to go to Anfield. Do they have anything left in the tank this season? Is this going to completely spiral out of control? Are they going to be able to kind of turn it around a little bit and at least get themselves to the Europa League? That's really what we're talking about there. In Spain, Almeria at Real Madrid on Saturday. Real Betis at Barcelona on Saturday. As you just kind of get closer to Barcelona inevitably winning this league because Real Madrid have not put up much of a fight. Valladolid at Cadiz on Sunday. Sorry, not Valladolid. Valencia. Huge game in the road. Two huge games in La Liga relegation battle-wise. Valencia at Cadiz on Sunday. Getafe at Espanyol on Sunday. 6-point matchups there at the bottom of the table, both of those. And then Atletico Madrid at Valladolid. I'm really curious to see if Atletico Madrid can find a way to finish second in this league. They're right behind Real Madrid. They have been phenomenal the past few months. And Real Madrid just are kind of going through the motions here. So we're going to see if Atletico can catch them. Italy. Salernitana at Napoli on Saturday. Napoli, if enough things go right, have a chance to clinch Serie A this weekend. They need to win, and then I believe they just need Lazio to not win, if I remember correctly. So they do need some help, but it is entirely conceivable that they are Serie A champions by the end of this weekend. AC Milan at Roma on Saturday. Huge game of top four implications. You've got two really, really good games in Serie A this weekend. Atalanta at Torino on Saturday. Your other one, Lazio at Inter on Sunday, which is why I said it's entirely possible we have a Serie A champion because Lazio have to go to the San Siro. Hellas Verona at Cremonese on Sunday. Relegation potential. The relegation teams in the relegation battle. And then Juventus at Bologna on Sunday as this mess trying to get it sorted out. Top four, Europa League spots, Europa Conference League, all of that stuff. Germany. League leaders Borussia Dortmund at VfL Bochum on Friday. I've mentioned this before. Dortmund have 2 road games left. They're against teams in the bottom half of the Bundesliga table. This is one of them. So after this, it's 3 home games and 1 road game. They could go 4 points clear of Bayern before Bayern play by winning this game, knowing that 3 of their final 4 are at home. This would be another important step toward them actually pulling this off. Then you got Leverkusen at Union Berlin on Saturday. Xabi Alonso's doing a wonderful job at Leverkusen. They are just climbing up the table, getting better and better. Union Berlin trying to secure Champions League for next season. Freiburg at Köln, another team trying to secure Champions League for next season. Hoffenheim at Leipzig, again, Champions League top 4 battle. And then Hertha Berlin at Bayern on Sunday. There's your Bayern game. Can they find a way to just get back on track, keep it within a point, or they may, if Dortmund don't win, they'll have an opportunity to retake retake first place in the Bundesliga. So you've got an interesting dynamic with the Friday-Sunday situation for Dortmund and Bayern. In France, Montpellier at Monaco on Sunday. Monaco trying to mount a surge to get one of the Champions League spots after losing to Lens last weekend. Lorient at PSG on Sunday as PSG go try and take another step toward wrapping up the league title. And Auxerre at Marseille on Sunday. Those are your big games in Ligue 1. And then Major League Soccer. Just a few I'm going to highlight here. It's kind of a strange weekend, and you also don't have the Philadelphia Union or LAFC playing because they're getting the weekend off due to their CONCACAF Champions League semifinal against each other, which leg 1 kicks off in, probably more like an hour and a half, knowing Fox, but later tonight. So wanted to acknowledge that as well. Really looking forward to that matchup. The games I wanted to highlight, though, easily your one of the weekend, FC Cincinnati at New England. Those are 2 of your best teams in the Eastern Conference. The Revs have been terrific. FC Cincinnati just announced that Brenner is going to Udinese. So we'll see what kind of impact he has until the summer. At Atlanta at Nashville, another 2 teams off to pretty good starts. NYCFC at Toronto. NYCFC playing better. This Toronto thing is hard to comprehend. I pointed out from the game 1 that I was just wrong in believing that they had fixed their defensive issues. And that has become abundantly clear. And the Union just ripped them to shreds last weekend. Can they get this thing turned around at all? Insigne was playing both Italian DPs were in the starting lineup. They were just non-factors until Insigne scored a meaningless but very good goal late because the defending was so bad. It is one of the more baffling things that I just cannot comprehend. So can they get it going? And then LA Galaxy at Orlando. A lot of Eastern Conference games that interest me this week. Finally, the Galaxy get their win. Can they build on it? Try and undo some of this damage they've already done to their season? In a difficult place to play against a good Orlando team. So that is what to look for in Major League Soccer. That is the weekend look ahead. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you next time.